in this chapter, basically just saying, "No, I'm staying put. You may have tried to fire me, but that's not going to take." And you have, you just have David slipping up on the political front, and even on the battlefield, where as you go a little bit further, they'll eventually just tell him, "Listen, guy, you just stay here in the back. We'll do the fighting. You mean more to us as a symbol at this point than you do as an actual warrior." And you just kind of see David's collapse after the Bathsheba thing. But
So it's both how they became king and then how they kind of unbecame king also.
Obviously all types of Christ fall at some point and don't match perfectly, but David is kind of a key in that. And then I assume this is kind of where you'll end up in a few chapters. Like where 2 Samuel ends is with David once again kind of being a good shepherd of his people when he gets to the point of offering himself in the place of other people. Don't slaughter these sheep, take me instead, which is where he probably lives up to the Christ type most accurately. But that's where this is headed. That's also actually where 2 Samuel ends.
Yep.
But
that's right. And that should kind of tell you something too, right? That in some ways, like you don't really. That none of these men are really the king that God wants them to be until they sacrifice themselves.
Yeah. I mean, he offers a substitution, me instead of the people, and it's fitting that the book ends there. But we know that David's life doesn't actually end there. There are like 3 or 4 chapters in 1 Kings where it goes on, and you're like, well, that's kind of a weird break. That's a weird way to break it, unless you're looking for something other than just this is the story of David's life. If you're looking for something that points forward to Christ, absolutely, that's perfectly fitting.
Yeah, kind of getting to that idea that perhaps God's kind of kingship is actually something that transcends death, even. So absolutely, lots of good stuff. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Turn to the chapter. As we do, would you say a prayer for us?
Yeah. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here. Please be with us as we read your word. Give us eyes to see and ears to hear. Help us to understand what this means for both your people back then, but also for us, since we know that it is a living word that ultimately points toward the one who gives us life, your Son, Jesus Christ. In his name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. So, I really enjoyed your comparison there about, Joab saying, like, well, you tried to fire me, but I'm not going anywhere. Like, I did not. I don't plan these things, man. It's just crazy. It's just this is the chapter that was there, and things happened, and I don't know. But without
there may be other things. Yeah, as we go through this chapter, there may be other things that you're like, well, gee, I don't know if that rings a bell at all. But
it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. But without making too many connections before we read the chapter, anything else that we ought to just keep in mind in terms of context or names that we shouldn't be forgetting? Connections.
Well, as you remember, I mean, just yesterday or 2 days ago, the last couple of days, you've just been dealing with the rebellion and basically coup attempt of Absalom, which is interesting. I mean, Joab is a character who brought Absalom back, and this is the other thing you get in the second half of 2 Samuel is there does need to be, everyone recognizes that it's best for everyone if there's a peaceful transfer of power, right?
That's right.
And Joab seems to at least initially have backed Absalom, but when it came down to it, Absalom moved too soon, and Joab is forced to kill him. And you almost wonder if there's resignation when he met with Absalom, being like, why did you do it now?
Yeah.
Because if you keep reading, Joab will back a different son next, because he sees the writing on the wall. David has to be forced to see. I mean, Solomon and Solomon's mother, Bathsheba, will eventually, and Nathan will eventually have to tell him, no, you have to do this now, guy. You can't wait. It's going to get taken from you. And just kind of David's blindness to this means that everyone else is starting to make moves because everyone else knows David is mortal.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, this is just the story of kingdoms of that time too, that if there's not going to be a peaceful transfer of power, there's going to be an unpeaceful transfer of power.
It's going to transfer one way or the other.
Everyone's already starting to count moves and say, where do I need to be? Yeah. And Joab is clearly one of them that's best positioned if he wants to be. I mean, he has an army. Yeah. And this is one of the things that when you go back to the David and Bathsheba incident, one of the things that tips the hand that something is off is what it says the spring of year when kings go out to war, and yet David's not going out to war. Joab is. And so Joab, over these years, I mean, the band of brothers and the friendship that is formed during war is often pretty strong. And Joab has kept building those ties and keeping up those ties, and David has not, which is kind of, I think, what leads to this chapter here, where Joab has the army, and David clearly, in some ways, doesn't anymore.
Yeah. Well, we'll see that again and again. You know, we when we went over Revelation, you know, how many times does the army decide, you know what, this is the guy who's actually like, you know, bleeding and risking his neck with us. He's the emperor now. I mean, like that just kind of happened all the time. Power hates a vacuum, as they say. But let's go ahead and read through the chapter. Just get it on the table here before us. So this is 2 Samuel chapter 20 in the English Standard Version here. Let's see here. Yeah, from the top. Now, there happened to be there a worthless man whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjaminite. And he blew the trumpet and said, "We have no portion in David, and we have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tent, so Israel." So all the men of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba, the son of Bichri. But the men of Judah followed their king steadfastly from the Jordan to Jerusalem. And David came to his house at Jerusalem, and the king took the 10 concubines whom he had left to care for the house and put them in a house under guard and provided for them, but did not go into them. So they were shut up until the day of their death, living as if in widowhood. Then the king said to Amasa, "Call the men of Judah together to me within 3 days, and be here yourself." So Amasa went to summon Judah, but he delayed beyond the set time that had been appointed him. And David said to Abishai, "Now Sheba, the son of Bichri, will do us more harm than Absalom. Take your lord's servants and pursue him, lest he get himself to fortified cities and escape from us." And there went out after him Joab's men, and the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and all the mighty men. They went out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, the son of Bichri. When they were at the great stone that is in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Now Joab was wearing a soldier's garment, and over it was a belt with a sword in its sheath fastened on his thigh. And as he went forward, it fell out. And Joab said to Amasa, "Is it well with you, my brother?" And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him, but Amasa did not observe the sword that was in Joab's hand. So Joab struck him with it in the stomach and spilled his entrails to the ground without striking a second blow, and he died. Then Joab and Abishai his brother pursued Sheba the son of Bichri. And one of Joab's young men took his stand by Amasa and said, "Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab." And Amasa lay wallowing in his blood in the highway. And anyone who came by seeing him stopped. And when the man saw that all the people stopped, he carried Amasa out of the highway into the field and threw a garment over him. When he was taken out of the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue Sheba, the son of Bichri. And Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel of Bethmaachah, and all the Bichrites assembled and followed him in. And all the men who were with Joab came and besieged him in Abel of Bethmaachah. They cast up a mound against the city, and it stood against the rampart, and they were battering the wall to throw it down. Then a wise woman called from the city, "Listen, listen! Tell Joab, 'Come here, that I may speak to you.' And he came near her. And the woman said, 'Are you Joab?' He answered, 'I am.' Then she said to him, 'Listen to the words of your servant.' And he answered, 'I'm listening.' Then she said, 'They used to say in former times, Let them but ask counsel at Abel. And so they settled the matter. I am one of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why will you swallow up the heritage of the Lord? Joab answered, Far be it from me, far be it, that I should swallow up or destroy. That is not true. But a man of the hill country of Ephraim, called Sheba, the son of Bichri, has lifted up his hand against King David. Give up him alone, and I will withdraw from the city. And the woman said to Joab, Behold, his head shall be thrown to you over the wall. Then the woman went to all the people in her wisdom, and they cut off the head of Sheba the son of Bichri and threw it out to Joab. So he blew the trumpet, and they dispersed from the city, every man to his home. And Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king. Now Joab was in command of all the army of Israel, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada was in command of the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and Adoram was in charge of forced labor. And Jehoshaphat the son of Ahilud was the recorder, and Sheva was secretary, and Zadok and Abiathar were priests, and Ira the Jairite was also David's priest. So, oh man, it's just, yeah, back and forth, so many things going on here, right? It's you know, and it's just Joab, right? Like you were saying, like in some ways it does kind of revolve around him, because on the one hand you see a moment where the guy just seems merciless, you know. It's just, man, the way that he just, you know, just runs him through. I mean, so that on the one hand, it's like the guy's ruthless. On the other hand, like, yeah, he does just, you know, take Sheba's head and goes home, and leaves the city be. So, it's kind of hard to put these guys in pigeonholes.
Correct. And there, throughout the story, there is an odd way in which clearly Joab is faithful to David.
Yeah.
Even at times if he disagrees with David, and David certainly disagrees with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, his the other thing about him is his way of solving things is, whether you like it or not, it is effective.
Yeah.
It gets the job done. And Joab's ruthlessness does almost always play in David's favor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the whole thing with Absalom. David says, spare Absalom, and Joab is just understands enough that is never going to work, guy.
Nope.
And so he disobeys David and kills Absalom, because there's no way you can have a guy who attempted a coup just come back and live in the house. That's never going to work. And so Joab puts it to rest for good. Yeah. But this is always his way of putting things to rest, and it's always a way, certainly when it comes to his position being on the line.
Yeah.
So you have here, I mean, this is almost a retelling of what he'd done to Abner.
Yeah.
When David had tried to make Abner the head of the army because he was fed up with Joab, and Joab strikes him down so that doesn't happen. Here you have the same kind of thing with Amasa, and Joab is not going to let that happen. But at the same time, he still serves David. He chases the guy who's after David. Earlier on in the story, when Joab was out fighting the wars, when it comes to the point of actually taking the city, he sends a messenger back to David, and he said, hey, you better come here and officially kind of take over the city and the crown, or they will make me king.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and that's something where if Joab actually wanted the crown, it's clear at this point in the story, he could, barring God just striking him down, he could have it.
It does
and
seem
yet
that way.
He never seems to want it for himself. And even when he's supporting Absalom or later on Adonijah, he is fine letting them wear the crown. He's also fine with them letting know that he holds a lot of cards as well.
Yeah, so that's really interesting the way you just put that, like, you know, kind of letting them wear the crown, right? I mean, it's And you mentioned like, who's holding the cards. There is a kind of very like House of Cards kind of feel to this, right? That he's like, the power position is really general of the army, and I'm going to stay that. And David can do his thing and be the figurehead and kiss the babies. And I'll listen to him most of the time, but like, but I am really running the show and calling the shots. I mean, it is fascinating. On the one hand, like you were saying, like seemingly fiercely loyal to David. It's almost like loyal to David against David's own weaknesses, right? Like makes the decisions that David's too weak to make. But on the other hand, there's just something really adversarial about it.
Oh, yeah, and David recognizes it. And so, I mean, David tries to put someone else in charge of the army here, which is not the first time he's tried to do it. Even here, he tries to put, after Amasa just doesn't come back on time, David puts Joab's brother Abishai, which obviously, Abishai's a brother. He just lets Joab run the show. And David recognizes Joab's strength. Eventually, he comes to recognize Joab's strength. He also comes to hate the man, and this is, one of the parting words he has to Solomon is, you've got to get rid of Joab, and I couldn't do it. You will have to do it. And Solomon will take him up on it. But, there's also just things, because it's, Joab and Abishai are from the same tribe. I think technically they're nephews of David. I don't know how much younger or what their age is in regard compared to David, but they're all from the tribe of Judah. They're interrelated, and some of that's got to be working on in the background too.
It really is. Just a testament to just how cutthroat it is, right? If you're just gonna do these things to your own, flesh and blood, right? It's just like there is just something kind of like ruthlessly logical about Joab, right? Like it's just like, that doesn't matter if he's your brother, it doesn't matter if he's your son, right? It's just, this is what you got to do. It is just like very.
Joab's answer is effective. It does get rid of the threats.
It's very Machiavellian like that. But and I think then that in many ways, I think. As much as we're like, oh, well, this Joab guy, he's some kind of tyrant, right? And we, certainly we can, we were at the beginning of the hour starting to kind of, like, hey, like, what's this kind of like, you thought you fired me, but guess what? So like, we can kind of make our own connections like that today. But in many ways, I feel like Joab is kind of like the perfect representation of our fallen sinful nature, right? Because we're baptized. And it's sort of like sinful nature, you're fired. You're not in charge anymore, right? Like I'm putting someone else in charge, and then the sinful nature is like, guess what? I'm still here, right? And there is this like really kind of weird kind of like two-faced thing going on where it's like there's this, we're never free of this Joab here. Joab is a thorn in David's side to keep him from becoming conceited. There it is, right? Well, and that's just the thing, and it's like the only way you can kill Joab really is to offer your own life, is to sacrifice your own life, right? Like because it's when you sacrifice your own life, now Joab finally dies, right? And you're finally free of Joab. But that's a hard thing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, the other thing, the way this chapter starts is with, as it says, a worthless man whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjaminite. Mm-hmm. So this is one thing that you have going not only through 1st and 2nd Samuel, but especially in 1 Kings until it blows up. This division among the tribes of Israel in general between Judah and the rest. And this comes to a head ultimately in 1 Kings, where what happens here is that Sheba and the Benjaminites, and he's going to go throughout all the tribes of Israel and say, we don't have a portion in David. He's really a king of Judah, and he's out for the Jews, I guess is what you call them. The rest of the tribes are all clearly second-class citizens to him. And that actually is the way that I mean, when you're reading through the Absalom story, that's kind of the fault line that Absalom toys with too. Anyone from the tribe of Judah gets in. Anyone who's from a different tribe of Israel doesn't. You know what? David doesn't have time for you. He's busy.
That's the danger. It's the instability, and that's like it's the weakness. It's the partiality, right? And James speaks to that. So I think we've kind of really done a lot for setting up the broad themes here. We got to take a break, but when we get back, we can kind of look at some of these little details and questions here. Everybody looking at 2 Samuel 20 on Thy Strong Word. Be right back. Okay, 90 seconds. So some of these questions here. So was Sheba's rebellion such a flop that only his family joined him, and the city he and his men were hiding in didn't even know he was there? Are we going off of just the way that the wise woman speaks? I don't know. I have a hard time believing that no one else noticed that he was there. I mean, especially at the beginning too. Like, it does seem to say that lots of people joined him, right? Or was it? It was he blew the trumpet, and it says here, so all the men of Israel withdrew from David, and then it says, but the men of Judah, right? That's a contrastive construction in the Hebrew. So I think the implication is that it's like the 10 tribes basically. I think there was another question on here.
I'm Pastor Ken
I don't like how it displays it on Facebook. Like, it only will show the 4 most recent ones, unless I go and click on the video and start it playing again. Okay, let's do it. Let's see if I can get those old comments. I don't like how it displays it on Facebook. Like, it only will show the 4 most. Oh, okay. Welcome back, everybody, to Thy Strong Word. I'm Pastor A.J. Espinosa. We're looking at 2 Samuel chapter 20, joined today by our guest, Pastor Scott Adel, pastor at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Collinsville, Illinois. If you've got a question for me or Pastor Adel, give us a call if you're listening live, 1-800-730-2727, or if you're in St. Louis, 314-821-0850. You can also send an email to KFUO@KFUO.org, or just type in your comment or question right there in the live stream going on Facebook.com/AJ Espinosa. A couple asking about just the extent and the origin of this rebellion. I think we're going to kind of talk about that in just a second here. I want to make sure to thank our underwriters at the Lutheran Heritage Foundation, LHFmissions.org. Thank you guys for your support of Thy Strong Word. So, we were just starting to kind of get into this. So this as you were saying here, it's clear from the previous chapter, right? And I think that's kind of it really is following straight on the heels of this, right? I mean, the last thing was, the men of Israel answered the men of Judah, right? It's already bad, right? There was a point where Israel was kind of that was referring to everybody, but it's starting to get contrastive with Judah, which should already be that's kind of a foreshadowing of things to come. We have 10 shares in the king, and so what's up with this claim here? And so, Israel's not liking the way that they're getting treated as second class to Judah.
And that was the way that Absalom placed himself. If I were king, I would have time to listen to everyone, not just from the tribe of Judah. Yeah. And so Absalom portrayed himself as a uniter, not a divider. And once Absalom goes down, I mean, Sheba basically says to the tribe of Israel, okay, Absalom wasn't the man, but David's still not our friend either. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to our tents. Let's figure out what we want to do apart from David. And David sees that this is going to be a disaster, and so quickly he wants to put an end to this, and put down. I mean, this is just another rebellion right after the one he just dealt with, and it has to do with they think he's partial to one group of people in the kingdom, and not everyone equally, and that he's their man and not anyone else's man.
Yeah.
And like I said, you and I have no idea what this would be like, because we would never never live in a country like that.
No.
So
yeah, I can't think of anyone who would like be so blindly pursuing a Judah first strategy, right? I mean, who would do?
It's very hard to imagine.
Very hard to imagine.
This is why we have to.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, it's kind of perfect on like looking at contemporary dynamics, but then again also just like inwardly, right? I mean, like there's always a me first policy, right, that like every individual is pursuing, right? And like people can tell this, right? I mean, and it gets back to what Joab was saying. He's like, hang on, like, so you're gonna love the people who hate you and then hate the people who love you? Like the people who love you aren't gonna keep loving you for very long if that's how you repay them. And so I mean, there really is something to that David's partiality is I mean, it's a kind of undoing for him. That I mean, like, but I mean, it really is for all of us, right? I mean, like, we all have that kind of tendency to have this kind of me first policy, but the irony is that the me first plan ends up being self-destructive, and we see that on the scale of nations, but also in the individual life.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is something kind of natural built in, so that we love our families more than we love other people. We love our friends more than we love other people.
Yeah.
But it probably got bad for however long Absalom was working that seam, where he just won't allow other tribes in to see David. That probably exacerbates this issue. Who knows how?
Yeah.
I mean, David had done fine, relatively fine up to that point, and when you do have people turned away, of course they're going to go back home to their tribe and talk about how the king would not hear them. And so that's gone on for a couple of years now. Yeah. The other thing going on is Sheba's the son of Bichri. He's either a Benjaminite or an Ephraimite. That's how, if you look at a map of Old Testament tribes, Benjamin and Ephraim rub up right against each other. But, I mean, especially with the Benjaminites, you saw this with the guy who was Shimei, the guy who was cursing David.
That's right.
There's obviously something with them against. They have a chip against David because Saul's
tribe.
Of Saul.
Yeah.
Correct. So he's the one leading it. As he flees all the way to the north of Israel, trying to draw as much of a following as he can, but it doesn't appear that he gets that much of a following, and it could be simply because David had just, with Joab's help, ruthlessly put down a rebellion, and as all of these guys are kind of leaving the army and going back home, they might just say, hey, I don't want another piece of that action. I'm not going to go after this crazy man.
Yeah. So let's take a look at this, because this is one of the questions, right? Like, was this kind of a flop, or like did it catch on? So the language, right, in verse 2, all the men of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba the son of Bichri, right? I mean, so that language, like at first blush, would seem to indicate that it's a pretty big chunk of the army here that's defected. Yeah. So I mean, like, but then again, it's just, I mean, it doesn't seem to go anywhere, and it's kind of weird too, because like when we go back and we look at the like the muster lists, right? You got kind of roughly even representation between all the tribes, and so it seems like all the tribes of Israel like ought to be able to take Judah. So I don't know. What do you make of this?
I take this kind of like at the first part of David's reign, where he reigned over the tribe of Judah, and the rest of them did not accept him until later. I think this is almost another point where, I mean, it's not covenant renewal, but it is basically all of the other tribes saying, do we want to go with this guy or no? And they decide, do we want to go with David or no? And they're like, actually, no, not I don't think so. And they all go. It seems to me that they all go home, and that Bickery, as for those who gather around Bickery, doesn't seem to be that much. I think that the Army just stands down. They all go home. Bickery wants to make a big thing of it, and doesn't seem like very many of them want to agree with that. They had just fought, like I said, a rebellion, and David had won and done so handily. They might just be like, I may not like David, but I'm not going to fight him right now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go against Joab right now. Joab seems to be on a winning streak, and the people on the other side don't come out so well. So I'll just stay home and plant my crops and raise my sheep for a year. Let's see where this goes.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, I think that's certainly possible. And I think it's got to be part of it, right? I mean, I think in general, like there's no escaping that kind of basic idea that the northern tribes are just sort of like, okay, we're just not really enthusiastic about any of these options anymore. It's just sort of like, well, just what's the point? And we're just going to stay home. We're not going to vote this year, right? So I mean, yeah, I think there's definitely something going on there. The other thing I noticed, if you look at the Hebrew in verse 2, it uses a singular construction, right? So it doesn't actually say like all the men, plural, of Israel withdrew, which could kind of sound like it's like every man in Israel or something like that. But it's like it says you got the word ish there, which in the singular very often means like army or like the force, right? So if it's like the Israel contingent, right, that was like there and under the circumstances leaves, right? Well, this is I think where it gets to your point. How many people was that, right? Like how many people like from Naphtali and Issachar and all this were really involved in what was essentially a civil war within Judah, right? I mean, and I think that maybe is a hint about what was going on here, right? That like this is really about how David, in some ways, kind of became unpopular in his own tribe, and so in some ways, right? Like not doing enough for Judah. At least in the eyes of the Judahites. And so then in that case, it's like, well, okay, well, he's got, a number of people from, the northern tribes who are backing him, but it's like, it's just, they're really kind of just like, you guys, you Judahites, like, we're just not really going to send that many guys like over for either side. So, I mean, like, I don't know, what do you think of that?
I like it. No, I think you're right on. Obviously, Absalom does draw support from other tribes. As to how much it is, this is the whole problem with Ahithophel and the other guy that go back and forth. And the other guy says, no, you need, clearly he looks around and says, you don't have that much here. Mm-hmm. You need to go get all of them.
Yep.
And but clearly they didn't because they're on the move rather quickly. Yeah. So I think you're right. I don't think he has, certainly not all the tribes and all the men from all the tribes.
Yeah.
So and certainly after Absalom army goes down, and as you said, the forest devours them.
Yeah.
There are a lot of men who lose their lives there. There are undoubtedly many more who fled and just went back home and aren't even here for this exact incident.
Right. Yeah. No. I think that's right. And we've seen this a lot of times, and I mean, you were saying it too, right? Like, it's not like it's like, okay, well, like, let's all go back to the Pentagon, or like, let's all go to the army base, right? It's like, no, I mean, like, when you have a war, it's like everybody, take your plowshares and beat them into swords, right? I mean, it's everyone comes off the farm, and then when the war is over, everyone goes back to the farm, So because it's like that, it's so decentralized, we kind of have this kind of false.
It's not a standing army.
Exactly. We have this false picture, just kind of imagining that like it's like, oh well, then all the professional soldiers like went. There were so few professional soldiers, right? Like war was everyone's hobby. right? Like the way that like sports is a hobby.
In the way the Swiss do, yeah.
I mean, it's just a different situation, and the decentralization too. I mean, like it's not like a country in the same sense, and so yeah, there's always power struggles going on within every single one of the tribes. So, anyways, but leaving that aside for a little bit here, okay, we gotta take a look at. Man, I want to deal with maybe like the concubines, but we just need to press on. So, okay. So, putting the concubines aside, let's go ahead and look here at this other woman here, this woman of wisdom, right? I hope we can have a chance maybe to go back about how Joab's just like super heartless, but like we got to cover this first, though. I just want to make sure we have time to look at it. So, like you were saying, there's like hardly. I mean, it's hardly anyone to begin with, and then by the time that they're in pursuit and they're like, oh man, this is not looking good, and they go and they hide out at Abel here, right? You got this woman who calls out. Now, this is just fascinating, right? It just says this is a wise woman. This is not even the first time that we've seen a wise woman, especially a wise woman talk to Joab.
Correct.
This is kind of interesting. Yeah, and then also just kind of the whole idea of, will they give up the guy, right, under the siege? Not the first time that question's been asked either. So, I mean, it's a scene I feel like that kind of has a number of things going on that kind of feel familiar, and then just kind of the way that this woman kind of comes back and says, hey, look, here's his head. That's not even the first time that we've seen that in the Bible. What do you think?
No. You're right. I think, like you said, he has, Bickry has small enough of a following that he can go with the guys he has into the city, and then Joab just lays siege to this city and is clearly going at it hard. And there's probably a way in which that city is just completely shell-shocked. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Yeah.
And this wise woman, clearly one of them, just says, time out. Joab, come here.
Yeah.
Let's speak.
Yeah.
And then she gives them the spiel. They used to say, this city is a wise city. This city used to be a place where people would seek for counsel. And it's a peaceful city. So would you destroy those who are peaceful and faithful in Israel? Would you do that? And Joab's like, far be it from me, madam. Far be it from me.
Yeah.
I'm only after one man. And she says, well, maybe we can make a deal. Let me go talk.
Yep.
And then comes back with his head. And clearly, even this city, although Bickry had holed up in it, clearly this city was not that keen on him either, and they're certainly not keen on Joab banging at the doors and the walls, and they know he's going to enter at some point. I mean, this is just the way all sieges are, is if you don't have enough food and water, and I doubt this city was stocking up for it beforehand, because it kind of seems like this just ended where he ended up. The way a siege always ends is either with starvation or eventually capture. There's just few other ways out.
Well, yeah, because the only other
gets called back.
Well, yeah, that's right. The only other thing is that the army is the one that starves, right? And they gotta just go back because we don't have enough food out here, right? Or whatever like the case may be. We're all dying of like I guess like no water or unsanitary conditions or whatever the case is, right? But like somebody basically runs out of stuff, can't keep lighting the fire, and then so it's just the other side wins, and that's kind of how these things go, like you're saying. So I mean, so it makes sense. You can see it. Like Joab, of course, is ready to make a deal. I mean, like anyone putting a city to siege doesn't want to just like have men die because we're running out of supplies. It's like, if you want to make a deal, let's do it. And so it's just
Joab sees. Go ahead. I was going to say, I think Joab sees, like we said, Joab's political eye right now seems to be pretty good. It looks bad for David to be attacking a tribe and a city of Israel right now. And Joab just says, the faster this is done, I mean, this is, I think, also why he immediately goes up to the city, starts the siege, and starts the battering ram. He wants this over as quickly as possible. This is not a good look for David, and this is not a good look for, if you're in David's cabinet, this is just not a good look. This needs to get over quick.
Yep.
She offers him a way to make it quicker. He says, let's do it that way.
Yeah, I think that's super insightful. I think we've seen that. Actually, you see it, I think, many times throughout the Bible. One of the reasons why the tribe of Dan, we've seen, looks so bad is because after they lose their inheritance that's been allotted to them by Moses, they go up north and they find what? This happy, peace-loving, like city full of nice guys, and they slaughter them all. And it's just even for Israelites who are like, well, they weren't Israelites, but really, you did that to them? I mean, just nobody looks well on that, and we've seen this too, when we're getting into later history, right, with Israel being under either the Assyrians or the Babylonians, the Persians, right? Like Israel's always trying to make the case, no, we're like a peaceful people and we're loyal subjects. Right. And then there's someone who's like, what are you talking about? They have a rebellion every 10 years. And so there's this constantly. Yeah, right. So it's a big theme, right? The reputation that you have is either peaceful, and it's so no one wants to mess with you. So reputation is really important for everyone involved, and Joab and the woman both get that.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing that's just kind of true throughout this is they all do kind of act like brothers. All the tribes still kind of act like brothers. And so this thing with them not liking the tribe of Judah, well, why not? Because Judah's in charge. This was the exact same problem that Joseph's brothers had with him, was that he was placed in charge over them, and they detested that. And so they fought with him. They eventually get rid of him. And then when Judah becomes the brother or the tribe in charge, then they just kind of resent that and fight against him. I mean, this is just the way that siblings interact in a fallen world. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It's just the way it goes.
Yeah, well, no, that's right. I mean, there's always this rivalry, right? But on a certain level, it's you never really want to just wipe people out for the sake of wiping people out, because a lot of ruthless people have said, people are a resource, right? I mean, in some ways, the most important one. So, it's not going to be.
But I mean, you see it in First Kings and Second Kings as well. With these particular people who know they have a shared history and who know they probably should be getting along and not fighting, and yet a lot of times can't stand each other.
Yeah, no, that's right. So, I guess last thing about this here, I find the language to be very reminiscent, in the story to be very reminiscent of a couple scenes. So you got the woman from Tekoa, who Joab goes and finds, right? And it's sort of amazing how it's just you have this kind of I don't know, the power of the speech of a wise woman, right? Is actually kind of been a theme, I think, in First and Second Samuel, and you see it with the way that Michal saves David, right? You see it, and just in lots of little ways, I think. So that's kind of interesting.
And Abigail,
yeah, well, yeah, and then there's the thing, right? Abigail saves Nabal's life, and also prevents a whole fight from happening, right? By giving up the food in that case, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know, what do you make of that? Even in the language here, you seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel, right? What do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, she's playing on him with I am one of these who are peaceable and faithful. You seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel, which almost is equating it with her. Are you going to kill me, a peaceable and faithful mother in Israel? And Joab's like, well, no. Far be it from me that I would ever put anyone to death, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't hurt a fly.
Even Joab has standards. He wouldn't do it to a peaceable, faithful mother in Israel. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it does echo. There are several different, and even earlier on, Job was one who quoted. It was after or during the Bathsheba incident where he sends back that messenger to David, and says, "Don't you remember what happened to that one guy where the woman threw the stone down from the wall?"
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
gosh.
he brings that up, which, if you read between the lines, might be him recognizing that David has gotten in trouble with a woman, and that this could be the end of him.
Yeah.
And he's going to cover for him, but this is foolishness, David. And does David's bidding. But you're right. Joab especially, he brings that up, and then he uses a wise woman to kind of bring Absalom back. And it will be Bathsheba and Nathan who eventually get David to pass down the crown to Solomon. Yeah. I don't know. There are ways in which the woman is to be the helpmeet, right?
Yeah.
And to help the man do what is best and correct. Wise women doing this throughout even these stories is exactly that, a wise woman being a helpmeet.
Yeah, there is something about it too, and like also the language there, like a mother in Israel. I feel like that's the exact same phrase, not positive. I'm thinking it is. That's used of Deborah, right? Who's unique among the judges, and like I guess is the the focus of a lot of attention. It's kind of like, hang on a second, why does she get to be a judge, right? Like, and these sorts of things. But what's so fascinating, right, is you look at the way that she is a judge, right, and then the way she is a judge looks different from the way that like all the other judges are described. I mean, she's the. Again, like the wise woman, she's the one who has to go to Barak and the rest and say, hey, what are people going to say about you, right? If I go and lead the army down there, like it's kind of the same argument that Joab makes, that they're going to name the city after me. Like, so, I mean, like that kind of like the women kind of bringing up, like, hang on, what's everybody going to say? And just being in tune with like optics, like you were saying, and thinking about things through like in that wisdom. It's like you see that again and again, and I think it kind of casts light back on the Deborah story.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Deborah herself says, this is going to look bad for you. Yeah. Because, like you said, the way in which she is judged is different from the way we see the other judges. And it's supposed to be. And when Barak fails at that, she points it out to him.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, at least, and this is, the experience I feel like I constantly have, it's just sort of like I'm just kind of doing my thing. And then, my wife has to come along and say like, so you are aware of like how that looks, right? And I'm like, oh man, you are aware of how that sounded, right? Oh dear. It's just, I don't know. My experience is that my wife is immensely wiser on those things, but so you have this then this theme that happens again and again. Yeah, they go ahead and they give up Sheba, which is exactly what the people in Keilah were going to do about David, right? So it's not that surprising. Comes back with the head here. What do you make here about like the names at the end here, and just the description, right? So Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king. Joab was in command of all the army of Israel, and you kind of get the list of everybody.
That's a key there.
Yeah.
Well, I think especially that first one is a key because the chapter began with David putting someone else in command of all the army of Israel.
Yeah.
And by the end of the chapter, no. Joab was in command of all the army of Israel.
Yeah.
That's a key. And like we said, going forward with Adonijah, it's also going to be a key.
Yeah, no. So this is all like setting things up, and it's just setting things up for like but so again, I mean, like I don't know, Christologically speaking, right? I mean, like I feel like this is in many ways you could link this up to the Gospels and say, so here comes King David, right? And he comes and he takes the throne, but yet Joab, just isn't dead yet, and there's still this Joab guy running around, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And not insignificant. Like, as we said earlier, he holds a lot of cards. He doesn't hold them all, and he knows that. But now David knows it too. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we see just on multiple levels, and we look back at the world and say fundamentally, like, I mean, there is, a prince of the air who's like, nominally in charge, but the thing is, well, the writing's on the wall, and this isn't going to last forever. It's going to transfer that power one way or another. So thank you, brother. Just a lot fascinating conversation, made lots of connections. looking forward to having you on again soon.
Good to be with you.
Everybody, Pastor Scott Adel, Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Collinsville, Illinois. We're going to take a look at a psalm next, but then we'll get back into 2 Samuel. To that, I'm Pastor A.J. Espinosa. Peace.
You've been listening to Thy Strong Word, produced by the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Office of National Mission in cooperation with Worldwide KFUO, the official broadcast ministry of the LCMS. Your support is vital for this program to continue. You can make a gift safe, secure.